everyone, I'm Mahana.
And I'm Celine.
And welcome back to a, what is it? News update. We are podcast.
Yes. So,
we're filming in person again. Back again.
Yes.
Back again.
This week has been extreme.
Okay, literally stop fidgeting the mic. I'm gonna stop you.
Don't talk to me. This week has been extremely eventful, and we will get into that. You know what? Right now, let's talk about our biggest update of the week, which is very huge.
Russia invades Ukraine.
Yes.
There's been a lot of anticipation, a lot of build-up, and it is finally time. And it is a very sad event. And this is good. Okay, I only did 3 news updates this week because this is going to take a very long time.
I only did 3 too because hers was long and I was just like...
It's going to take like 20 minutes, so just buckle in and we're going to get straight into it.
All right.
So this is probably the biggest news we've had in the past like 2, maybe not 2 years, maybe like a year. So
yeah, for a long time.
Besides like COVID, this is like probably the biggest news. It is huge, big deal for the whole world, and that's not something that like a lot of other newses can say. But before we start, let's like define some terms. And again, I've talked about Russia and Ukraine for the past like 20 news updates maybe, and we talked about it consistently every week, and so, like, we've talked about the backstory, so if you want to like hear about each step along the way, check out another
we don't have a whole ton of time to go in depth on like the entire backstory, so
but okay, so key terms. Russia is a communist country in Asia and part of Europe who is led by Vladimir Putin, and Ukraine is a part of the former Soviet Union and is now a separate democratic country. The Soviet Union was like a group of countries that like functioned under like one main leadership, and it was like a whole like communist group. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it was basically like a treaty made between 30 countries to help promote peace and give military support to its members. And the main reason it started was because like it wanted to stop the spread of communism and like other things that promote democracy, which is like why they like created after World War II. It basically just wanted to stop Eastern Europe from invading Western Europe. And it is the main antagonizer and like opposition towards Russia invading Ukraine and like Russia's expansion overall. Crimea's annexation happened in 2014, and that's when like the main like sort of conflict started. So Crimea used to be a part of Ukraine, but Russians in Crimea like kind of like made a big fuss about like being in Ukraine instead of Russia, and then that gave Russia an excuse to invade Crimea and annex it, which is like take it back to their country. And many countries thought this was illegal, illegitimate, and they didn't recognize it, but that Russia still like took it over, and that's when like the main conflict started. So, in the past year, we've seen the buildup of a lot of troops in, like, around the Ukrainian border, and Russia has, like, threatened to invade. Putin in the past has said that they're not actually going to invade, like, they just want to, like, do something or whatever, but everyone knew that Putin is a lying little bald dude. So, he definitely was not keeping his word. And so, like, the actual invasion was, like, kind of, like, coming a reality in, like, late January, but it has become very, very prominent, and the actual, like, invasion started on the 23rd and the 24th of February. So just before 6 a.m. on the 26th in Russia, Putin announced a, quote, special military mission in Ukraine, which is super sketchy, and that was the official declaration of war on the Ukraine. And you might be asking, like, what does a military operation mean? Like, how does that mean that he's going to war? Well, basically, if they're sprouting a military operation, that essentially means that they're, like, putting their troops in action, and they're actively going to start, like, threatening the Ukrainian people and taking over territory. So more than, actually, there was, like, several different websites with the amount of troops, but I'm just going to say that up to 200,000 troops from Russia were ready for combat on Wednesday, and they've also assembled, like, 200,000 personnel in airships, warships, like, sea vessels, and everything. They've been attacking a bunch of cities so far. The most, I think, famous is Kiev, and that's, like, one of the main cities in Ukraine, and they've been, like, airstriking it. And Putin said that anyone who interfered with this invasion would lead to, quote, consequences they have never seen. And I actually watched his video, and when she was, like, threatening people, he's scary.
He's so scary.
Literally, Russian people are just scary.
He's like this authoritarian leader who, like, kills people.
Literally, like, okay, that's wrong to say that all Russian people are scary, because a lot of Russian people are good people. And, like, we can't generalize an entire country just because of their leader.
Is scary.
Yeah, and a lot of people want him out. Like, there was actually protests happening in Russia against the invasion, which is, like...
Wow. Yeah.
So you may be asking, why does Russia even want Ukraine in the first place? Well, of course, like, they have deep connections with each other because of, like, they were in the Soviet Union together, which is, like, the communist organization. And Russia never fully, like, said that it was a separate nation. In fact, last year, President Putin wrote a piece describing Russians and Ukrainians as, quote, one nation, and he said it was, like, ever since the Soviet Union broke, it was, like, destroying the Russian history. So that was, like, one of the reasons. He's like, Ukraine is, like, supposed to be part of Russia. But I think more reasons is because if they invade Ukraine, it allows for Ukraine to be sort of like a puppet for Moscow, and it allows them to do so many things. Like, they have better access to sea, which is important for trade and, like, having power over naval fleets, and they also have access to, like, so many critical points in the world. And not only this, but it kind of, like, gives a message to the rest of the world that they are there, they are in power, and you should be worried. Right. Which is, it's just essential for, like, Russia to expand their power. It also prevents Ukraine from joining NATO, and that is a huge concern for Russia because...
For sure.
Because, like, Russia... Like, NATO and Russia hate each other. Come on now.
I mean, NATO was literally created to, like, stop the Soviet Union and the spread of communism, so it's basically, like, Russia is NATO's main enemy.
Yeah. So he does not want Ukraine to join NATO, and so by invading, it not only allows them not to join NATO, but it also allows for Moscow to get, like, many advantage points. And, yeah, it would just be really good for Russia if they invaded Ukraine. So, yeah. Also, like, another thing that I think is important to mention is because, like, previously he said, like, oh, Ukrainians and Russians are the same, like, that's why we want to, like, make them closer together. But recently he said the main reason for invasion is because to stop the spread of Nazism.
Yes, I heard about that.
I will explain. So he said that they're invading to stop, like, oppression and aim for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. And he, like, claims there's been, like, mass genocide of, like, Jewish people, when in fact there has been no genocide in Ukraine. It is a vibrant democracy, and it is literally led by a president who is Jewish. So, like, if you didn't know, Nazis, like, were, like, happened in World War II, and they basically, like, rounded Jewish people up and sent them to concentration camps, and it was, like, this awful thing.
Yeah, they were very anti-Jewish. They were also, like, anti, like, black people and, like, a lot of different things, but their main thing was, like, anti-Jewish people.
Yeah, and so he's like, Ukrainians are Nazis when they're literally led by a Jewish person and have no active genocide.
Doesn't even make sense. Like, when...
The thing that I think is funny is because he's like, yeah, they're Nazis, but, like, you're literally a communist country, like, led by a dictator, Putin, so you're more closer to, like, Nazism than they are.
Yeah.
Because democracies
are a lot more oppressive, for sure, because they have, like, an authoritarian leader. Like, do you know how long he's been ruling over Russia?
A long time.
I just know.
And I know, like, he's actually, like, put any opposition he has in jail.
He puts them to death sometimes, too. He's not afraid to poison people.
Yeah, like, and of course, there's no, like, evidence of, like, poisoning, but there is. Like, he's hidden it so well. Like, he's hidden it so well because he has so much power, but we all know. And then he's also, I think there was, like, a really famous case in which he was, like, putting like, person who was opposing him in jail. But I think it was, like, Robert, I don't even know. I forget. But Vladimir Zelensky, who was the president of Ukraine, said, "How could I be a Nazi?" Who literally, he's a Jewish, like, yeah. Anyway,
that would be anti himself.
Yeah.
Like,
and he also, like, I feel like ever since 2014, like, there was actually a president of Ukraine until 2014 that was very pro-Russia, and when he got kicked out because everyone hated him in Ukraine, that's when Putin started making a big deal. That's when the annexation happened, like, the same year. It was, like, a big thing. So, yeah. And later in 2021, like, that's when he started deploying troops to Ukraine's border, and then like I said, there was a lot of troop buildup, and, like, people were trying to negotiate. Like, the president of the US, Joe Biden, was trying to negotiate with him, but Putin won't listen to a soul. I'm not even joking.
Like, we pressed sanctions on Russia and stuff, and we said we would, like, before they invaded, and obviously Putin doesn't care about that. Like, he knows there's gonna be opposition, but he still did it, so.
Yeah, and, like, everyone in Europe is so on edge. I mean, it's a horrific scenario. I mean, they're violently invading, and this will not only cause, like, a lot of death because of the war, but it will also see up to 5 million refugees, like, internally displaced people inside Ukraine and outside, and it would totally disrupt the entire state of, like, the entire Europe, because the refugees will, like, leave Ukraine in fear of war and, like, go to other countries, which will, like, offset their in total, like, asylum seeking state.
Yeah.
And, like, people are hiding everywhere. I actually saw, I think this is, like, the saddest thing I've seen in a very long time, but I was seeing videos of people, like, their apartments got blown up, like, their faces are bloody, like...
Yeah, I've seen, like, footage of, like, what it looks like in Ukraine right now, and it's not, like, a safe place to be at all. It's very dangerous.
But the thing that was saddest to me was, like, there's, like, a lot of bomb threats, a lot of airstrike threats, so... This threat happened, like, in a city where a hospital was and, like, in the area. And so there was, like, a premature unit. And, like, premature babies are ones that are born too early and they can't really take care of themselves how they're supposed to. So they have to stay under, like, hospital supervision. But because of the bomb threats in Ukraine, they had to move this entire unit downstairs. And these babies were, like, lined up. They didn't have proper bedding. And, like... The babies that were on oxygen because they couldn't breathe properly because they weren't fully developed, the lady literally had to, like, pump a bottle to give them air. Like, it was so bad.
That's terrible.
Like, imagine having a kid that's premature and you're constantly worried about, like, whether they'll survive because they're forced into an area without proper equipment.
So many people have to be displaced, whether it be kids, children, adults, parents. So many people are, like, in bad situations right now, which I think is really important to talk about. And also, there are a lot of causes you can, like, donate to. I know I've seen on, like, Instagram and stuff. So if you do want to help, please feel free to. There are, like, a ton of causes. But also, it's just important to recognize, like, their struggle right now.
Yeah, it's so bad. And there's not enough humanitarian aid at all. No. And I'll talk a little bit later about how you can help. But besides, like, the deaths of thousands, the displacement of, like, millions, and, like, the, like, just trauma of millions more, it is already affecting the U.S. and several other states. Because if you haven't noticed, the economy is, like... definitely taking a toll. Oil and gas prices are reaching a record high.
Really high.
And, you know, you might be like, that's just oil and gas. But it's gonna, like, affect not more things as well. But also, like, if you're a person in poverty who needs to go to a job and, like, you need to, like, get gas... Paying for gas is crucial. And even
gas
if it's,
is
like...
so expensive. Yeah. I did not realize how expensive it was. And when I did, I was like... Whoa.
Yeah, like, gas can cost, like, up to $100 for, like, a full tank refill. Yeah. And, like, that, people can't pay for that a lot of the time.
It's a lot of money.
Especially, like, if it's rising. If it's, like, because cars can hold up, like 20 gallons, maybe. And if the gas prices are going to reach, like, $7 per gallon, I think, or, like, $6 per gallon, which is, it used to be, like, $3. So that's twice the amount it used to be. And oh, God. It's
insane. And it's unaffordable for a lot of people, too.
Yeah. So you may be asking, what are we doing now to help this situation? Right. Of course, like, Ukraine's suffering. The world is on edge. Russia's having the time of its life.
We're, like, practically at war. Like, Russia and Ukraine are at war.
Like, Putin, just get your bald head back in Russia and mind your own business.
No one wants you, okay?
And he's literally giving all the good Russians a bad name, too, which makes me mad. Because I feel bad for those people.
I feel, like, not only do I feel awful for Ukraine, but just the people in Russia who are, like, who hate Putin, and they're like, what the heck are you doing?
No, and I think, like, we're just gonna have a little bit of a bright end to this, so, like...
Okay.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about, like, what the West is doing to, like, help this situation. So, the West is, like, the main opposer, a part of NATO, against Russia. So... The European Union, which is, like, the organization of a lot of other European countries, typically Western Europe, and the UK, which is England, have imposed personal sanctions on President Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Celine, what are sanctions?
Okay, so sanctions can be, like, kind of, like, basically a punishment if a country does something. So it could be economic sanctions, like, we're not going to trade with you, we're not going to sell you this product, we're not going to import stuff to your country or, like, export stuff, whatever it may be. But it's basically, like, punishments for, if you do this, we're going to do this back to you, and it can hurt a country economically, trade-wise, a lot of different ways. So.
Yes. So, they have imposed sanctions. The U.S. actually is targeting, like, Sberbank, which is, like, Russia's largest bank, and and Biden actually noted that it holds more than a third of Russia's banking assets.
Wow.
Washington is already penalizing the second largest bank. And with Thursday's actions, like Biden's sanctions, like economic sanctions, like freezing their money and all their funding through banks, he said that we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets.
Wow.
So he's freezing their money, like freezing them, meaning
Right.
that they can't
So
take it
it
out,
will hurt them
it.
economically, but there's also like concerns that they're just gonna like go to China and like get that will help them. But but still, like at least we're doing something that's gonna have some impact.
Yeah. And like the EU also wants to like restrict access to like capital markets. Germany has halted approval on Russia's gas pipelines. The UK said that like all major Russian banks would have their assets frozen. And NATO, for the first time in all of NATO history, they have enabled their troops. And I think people think like, okay, they're gonna fight against Russia. Not necessarily. So what this means is that they're enabling their troops and they're like deploying them, but that doesn't mean that they'll fight against Russia. It essentially means that they're deploying them to the NATO members, so like the 37 members in Europe that are around Ukraine. They're deploying troops there so that if Russia ever gets greedy and tries to like invade surrounding countries because they're like high off of the victory from like invading Ukraine, then they wouldn't be able to, because they kind of like the deployment of the NATO task force kind of like gives those other NATO members security. And by the way, Ukraine isn't a NATO member because Russia is so against it. But and also like as for the U.S., Biden, our president, has been clear that no troops will be fighting in Ukraine. But he is also clear that like the troops that are gonna be they are being deployed, but they're mostly just for the security of NATO members. And let's end this on a good note, shall we? This is taking forever, but I think it's like honestly really interesting.
It is very interesting and obviously extremely relevant too.
So important, like just to know what's happening in the world. But I think like it's such a dark time, but I think the thing about dark times is it unites people.
Absolutely.
Because everyone like kind of like recognizes how much Ukraine is suffering, and people all over the world are protesting and like signing petitions to the government and like giving them humanitarian aid, and I like it kind of gives you a little bit of hope. Like like it's not stopping Russia.
There are bad humans in our world like Putin who would like invade a sovereign country and like displace thousands of people, but there are also good people who will help that country and help the people in that country in so.
And like I encourage you to check out, it's like Impact on Instagram, and they posted like this thing showing protests from all around the world. There was in Germany, in the UK, like in Australia, in the US, like everywhere, and it was just showing pictures of protests, and I thought that was really beautiful. But you're asking, well, how does this pertain to me? How do I help? Number one, it's important to be educated on the world, and something that is so prevalent, it could completely like affect you, affects your family members.
And even if it doesn't affect you individually, it's affecting other people across the world and other people who have family across the world, and so many people just in our world right now, which is why it does pertain to you, because we are like together in this. We're like a planet of people who, and we should support each other.
Exactly. And like, we can't stay content in our bubble of ignorance, because other people are suffering, and it's important to recognize that.
Absolutely.
And so, how do you get involved, you may ask? Well, you can write petitions, write letters to the government, because Ukraine is in desperate need of support. And so, like, kind of like nudging the government and saying, like, we care about these people, these innocent people that are, like, being forced out of their homes. That's important. Number two, you can donate. There's actually a foundation called CARE, that's CARE. I think it's an acronym. And they're providing a lot of humanitarian aid, emergency aid, through food, water, and hygiene kits and more, which is essential, because if people are hiding like in tunnels and stuff, they don't have access to food.
There are kids, there are babies, there are children, there are parents, like all these people who need that aid, and like organizations are providing that aid and providing you with the opportunity to help them get that aid.
Yeah, because like they don't have access to that without the fear of like being bombed if they like go to a grocery store. Like they can't do that.
It's not a good situation they're living in right now. So any help, you may not think it's like making a difference if you donate like $5 or $10, but literally any help you can give, they will so appreciate. That can change the course of their life.
Yeah. And then there's another thing is like, what was I gonna say? I literally forgot.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, like the people, it's not even just the people who are in hiding, like the people, refugees, like they can't stop and get food because like bombs, number one, and number two, like the Russian troops are everywhere, and like they just have to be fast and stealthy.
Yeah.
So like that helps people, refugees, like everyone, and it like all of our hopes and prayers go out to Ukraine in this like troubling moment for their country, and we hope eventually things get resolved and Russia backs itself up back into like, it's such a big country, why do you want more land? Like,
I know, it's like
did you see the meme that Ukraine posted?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, so Ukraine's like official Twitter, they like posted a meme, and it was like, headaches are in the front of your head, like migraines are in the back of your head, like they hurt the back of your head, and then Russia, it like hurts all over your head. I thought it was so funny.
Yeah, honestly, Putin's a headache, not gonna lie. Like, I don't want to say Russia is, because it's not like the whole country collectively was like, let's go invade Ukraine. It was freaking Putin.
Like, that man needs to get off.
That man needs to.
Like, your country is so big already, why do you need more land?
And also, do you not care about the lives of like millions of people who are dying? Apparently not. Literally. I don't think he does.
Anyway.
Oh my god, okay.
Welcome back from the break.
Welcome back. Okay, so after that very lengthy but very important news update, we have a very good update that's like very, very happy. Nothing too like terrible. So the first black woman was actually nominated to be on the Supreme Court, which is really exciting. So her name is Kaale Brown Jackson, and I'm gonna give a quick overview of like the Supreme Court and like how the whole process works, kind of. So basically, the executive branch of the government, like the system of checks and balances, which is like all three branches have to like regulate the power between them. Basically, the executive branch of the government has the power over the judicial branch to nominate Supreme Court judges.
We actually talked about this in an episode.
Oh yeah, I think we did actually.
The judicial branch.
Yeah, so basically what happens, so the president, who right now is Biden, nominates Supreme Court judges, and then the Senate has to vote to approve the nominee. So right now, at this moment, Biden has nominated her, but she hasn't been approved by the Senate, but it definitely looks like she will be. And a Supreme Court justice actually serves a term of life. Like, the longest someone has served, I think, was 36 years on the Supreme Court. So you can serve as long as you want until you, like, choose to retire. Or, like, really, and you don't have to be elected. Like, say, with, like, president, it's, like, every 4 years you get elected. But with the Supreme Court, it's just you're nominated. And if you get appointed, then you're just there for as long as you want to be there. So, basically, it'll be pretty great when she is, like, appointed on the Supreme Court, because she will be the first black woman to serve as a justice. And right now, the majority of the Supreme Court is actually Republican. So there are currently, like, 6 conservative people in the Supreme Court and 3 liberal people, 9 in all. And one of the people recently retired, and I'm going to talk about that in a sec, but, basically, yeah, so the Supreme Court right now is, like, majority Republican, so there will be, like, one more Democrat now, but it still will be majority Republican. But, so Kaale Brown Jackson is 51 years old. She's married to this dude named Patrick Graves Jackson. Her husband's actually a gastroenterological surgeon, so they're both, like, very successful.
By the way, that's like a stomach surgeon.
Yeah.
In simplest terms.
Yeah. So they're both, like, really successful. They actually met when they were studying at Harvard, so, like, obviously they're both very smart. They have 2 daughters, too, which is great. But, so, when Kaale was growing up, her parents were, like, in public service, so, like, they were teachers, I think. And her brother was, like, a police officer, and he was also in the military. So she was born in Washington, D.C., by the way. And, you know, something I just love about this is that, like, during high school, she actually was on the debate team, and she said, like, a lot of the reason she went into law and, like, started, like, loving law and went to law school was because of, like, debate, which I think is really inspiring, because...
We do debate!
Yeah, that just makes me happy. Like, I just like that. Like, honestly, it's very inspiring. So, she was, like, high school president, a debate champion. So she's very smart, too. She, earned a graduate degree from Harvard, which, obviously... If you don't know what Harvard is, it's, like, probably known as the best college in the world, basically. Like, it's an Ivy League college. It's, like, really hard to get into, incredibly hard. Yeah. So, you have to be really smart and successful to get into it. Yeah. So, she actually served as a law clerk for, Stephen Breyer. So Stephen Breyer was on the Supreme Court, but he recently announced his retirement in January, actually. So ever since he announced his retirement, she's been seen as kind of like the main person who will come in and like replace him, I guess. And this is also like Biden's really happy about this. He said he was really inspired by her story and said, quote, her parents grew up with segregation, but never gave up hope that their children would enjoy the true promise of America. And he wants the Supreme Court to be like fair, strive for justice. And he had actually had like a previous goal of like having the first black woman to be on Supreme Court. So like he did accomplish his goal right now because he nominated her, which is really great. And they're hoping she'll be confirmed in her position by like April 11th before like the August recess. Or wait, what? No, sorry, I said that wrong. Ignore the August recess part. Before like April 11th. So this is really great. It's just definitely exciting because she is a woman and she is black, so
I feel like representation is really important because it kind of shows like those girls like of color that yeah, you can do this. Like someone else like you is there, so that means it's open to you as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's just really inspiring.
Breaking boundaries.
Yeah, and like how she like grew up and like did the debate team. I just love that. That makes me happy. I don't know, that just makes me really happy. I like her. Okay, anyways.
Another important update. So, George Floyd. We've talked about George Floyd.
Yes.
We all know George Floyd. He's all over the news. Celine, who's George Floyd?
Okay, so George Floyd, he was a big icon for the Black Lives Matter movement because basically he was kind of like one of the main victims that was killed by a police officer unjustly. So he was kind of like seen as like almost the start of like he kind of like really sparked a lot of like of the protests and stuff because I'm pretty sure they had like a warrant, right? Because he had like they said he had drugs or something.
No, he like stole cigarettes.
Okay, counterfeit money too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. So there was like counterfeit money, he stole cigarettes, but that doesn't mean they should have killed him. So basically he did end up dying and didn't they strangle him? Like it was like he had said I can't breathe.
What happened? Oh my god.
Sorry. I dropped the microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah, so he had said
but like essentially what happened was he was stealing cigarettes and like of course he had like other issues with the law. But the guy who owned the cigarettes were called the police. They came, they captured him and immediately I think his name was Derek Chauvin, he like was the main officer and he like started kneeling on his like neck and like putting his knee on his neck and strangling him.
And he said, I can't breathe multiple times. He made it very clear that he wasn't able to breathe and that he was going to die. He said, like, I'm going to die. And they continued to do this and then he ended up dying. And that was just like key because a lot of people felt it was racially motivated, which it was because he did die unjustly of like, not only was the crime not fit for death, but he had said multiple times that he was like in an uncomfortable situation.
And people actually like confronted the police and like told them that like, he's struggling, like I'm pretty sure this is illegal, like it's not allowed to do that at all.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so the main like people in this incident were actually convicted. Derek Chauvin was already convicted, but there was 3 other former police officers who were like also involved in the arresting and like killing of George Floyd, and they were actually being tried. And on Thursday, they were found guilty of violating the civil rights of George Floyd. And I think like the main person was Derek Chauvin because he's the one who actually did the act of putting his knee on his neck and strangling him and not listening to his pleas. Right. But the other officers, J. Alexander Quang, Thomas Lane, and Tao were all convicted because they actually they were said that they were not intervening to stop their fellow officer.
Right. It is like a crime if you are witnessing someone doing something like unjust or like against the law or something. It is a crime to not do anything. Like it's for a police officer, like to just witness that.
Especially a police officer. I think it's like a universal like Good Samaritan.
And there's also the Good Samaritan law too. Like if you see someone like getting robbed or something and you do nothing about it, then that you are breaking the law too because it's almost like you're complicit by doing nothing.
The Good Samaritan law basically protects everyone who helps another person out of like a bad situation, and it kind of like tells you to do that. And especially for a police officer, not intervening when something is obviously wrong is like illegal. So Tao, Quang, and Lane, the 3 police officers, face life into prison, although severe punishment is like unlikely. They're more likely to get like maybe 10-ish years in prison, I'm estimating. But they're scheduled for their like actual like what's it called, like sentencing.
Hearing or
Yeah, they already got like charged, but like because they're found guilty, but there's like a separate like trial for like your actual punishment and whether
isn't
you're
it
guilty
like an arraignment or something? Or I don't remember the name, but I know something like that.
But they like face up to life in prison, and they're gonna like actually get their sentencing in June. So they're on charges of aiding and abetting murder and manslaughter. And actually, like, Floyd's brother, Phil Nuise Floyd, said in a conference that this is just accountability. It can never be justice because I can never get George Black.
Right, absolutely.
Makes sense. But at least it is accountability, better than
nothing, but it's still
definitely not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, they also like said that it's like really sad, and it like doesn't change the fact that he died, but like they also think that like his death empowered so many people, and that they think he is being so powerful even when he died, so like that's like a good thing. So yeah, that's basically it.
I do think his death was like the spark that lit in people's mind. Like there were still protests going on even before that, but I feel like that was the major turning point for sure.
Definitely, especially in 2021, because I think the history of Black Lives Matter, there was like a huge protest in 2018, but then it kind of fizzled out, and then like and then it came back when that happened. So.
Right. Okay. So my next update also has to do with Black Lives Matter too. Actually, sort of. It's about Ahmaud Arbery.
Yes.
So we have reviewed this like in a lot of different updates. So could you give us a quick overview of like that case, what it was?
Alright. So Ahmaud Arbery was like a prior like football star in high school. He was just like a very like athletic person. So he was taking a jog in a neighborhood, and in that neighborhood there was reports of like people being like breaking into houses, and these two men, of course it was racially motivated, obviously, and so like these two men, definitely very like racist people, they saw him and they automatically just decided he looked suspicious, so they pursued him in a pickup truck with guns, and they confronted him, and he was like, "Why are you arresting me? I'm literally on a jog." He's
like, "What the heck is happening?
I'm on a jog, bro."
Yeah.
And they were like, "No, like, it's citizen's arrest," which is, like, such a lame excuse.
Yeah,
and
you have to have, like, a probable cause to arrest someone.
You can't just say, "Oh, you look guilty."
Yeah, you literally have to have either a warrant or a probable cause, so...
Yeah.
You don't have
and then they ended up, like... He was, like, pointing his gun at him. Mind you, Ahmaud Arbery, the victim, was, like, completely unarmed. He was on a jog. And they ended up, like, getting in a scuffle because Ahmaud didn't want to be shot. So he ended up, like, firing the gun, and Ahmaud died because of the shot.
Okay, so thank you for that overview.
Yes.
But basically what happened a month ago, jurors found the defendants in the case, so like the father and the son, they had targeted, they basically found them guilty of these crimes of like manslaughter and all this stuff. So they were sentenced to a life in jail, right? Yeah. So they were sentenced to life in jail. But then a new trial began where they were trying to figure out if this was actually like a hate crime and whether it was racially motivated. So like the previous decision of court wasn't like, oh, they killed him because of his race. It was just they killed him, like they're responsible. But this new trial was about whether or not it was a hate crime. So basically a hate crime, just as an overview, is like a crime directed towards a victim or like a prejudice or bias associated against that person that is why you killed them. Like if you just kill someone just for the fun of it, that wouldn't be a hate crime. But if you kill someone specifically because of the color of their skin or their race or something like that, that would be considered a hate crime. So,
you kill someone just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be psychotic, you know? I mean, that's,
God.
like, if you're just
like, the way you said that so casually.
Right? Like, oh, a random pedestrian.
Let's kill them.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a hate crime, but that would still be a crime. But anyways, so yeah, the previous verdict had found the three of them guilty of felony murder, but it didn't address at all whether race had been involved. So basically, the verdict took place of this, like, the racially motivated verdict, which they did decide it was a hate crime, and they did shoot him because of his race. And I feel like we all knew that before, but this is just a stepping stone because it shows kind of like that we can hold people accountable for hate crimes like these. And actually the verdict took place a day before the second anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery's death, which is like really symbolic, I feel like, just because it's like setting a precedent for the future, I guess, because it's like this isn't going to happen again. We're going to hold people accountable. And obviously it was good that they were charged before, but I feel like charged with being specifically a hate crime just is better, you know, because it's like kind of recognizing that.
Yeah, because oftentimes it is hard to prove whether something is a hate crime in like a court of law.
It is.
Even like if you know it is, it's hard to prove it.
But yeah, so basically how they proved it, they actually found like a ton of text messages and social media posts where the son and father, they had like said racial slurs, derogatory comments. They said the N-word multiple times, like very racist things, and that along with other stuff was enough to prove that the crime was racially.
And literally, if you're seeing a black man and calling him suspicious and then shooting him, that says a lot.
Yeah, and they had number one, no cause. Like, why else would they if it weren't a hate crime? Which I think it was pretty clear, but now it's like legally clear. Like, there's a difference between something being true in a legal sense, and now it's like true in a legal sense, which is like important. Good. Yeah,
because it's official. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you know, you're getting married to someone, but like it's not official until they propose.
Yeah,
that's a really weird.
Or like, you know, if you're like, we're getting divorced, and then when you sign the divorce papers, you're divorced.
Sorry, I feel like that's a really bad analogy, but
no, I mean, yeah, it is. Like, you have to go to court to be divorced and like sign the papers.
Okay.
Guys, get divorced.
What? Don't get divorced, please.
Okay. Well, if you want to get divorced, then get divorced. Don't stop people in abusive marriages. Okay.
We're just gonna moving on.
Anyways.
So COVID restrictions. I feel like COVID has been off the news for a while, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like it's the least, not that it's not concerning, believe me it is, but I feel like now with the Russia-Ukraine thing, it's kind of like,
scaled down a little bit.
Yeah.
So like, actually, COVID restrictions are loosening.
Okay, CDC, what in the world was the COVID restrictions are loosening?
Okay, basically, so the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, actually is made like a new sort of recommendation saying that you really don't need to wear masks indoors based on new guidance. So like.
Wait, is this just for vaccinated people?
It's like for about 70% for the U.S. population. I think it also applies for people that are boosted, vaccinated, and also who have been sick in the past, I believe. And like the CDC is continuing recommending like get tested, get vaccinated, because it is still like there's a lot of cases. Just because it's on a downturn doesn't mean that they're gone. There's still a lot of cases. But it is definitely getting better. I feel like everyone's just gotten it already. So, like, either you got it and you, like, had issues or you don't. So, it's kind of like a grand, like, herd immunity type situation.
Yeah, and herd immunity is basically when so much of the population has had a certain virus that it's, like, they're immune to it.
Yeah, or, like, they're vaccinated and immune. But Dr. Rochelle Valencia told her a lot. She's the CDC director. And she said that, like, the new recommendations shouldn't mean that you should stop wearing your mask, and they shouldn't mean that you should stop getting vaccinated. And she said, quote, anyone should wear a mask if they feel safer, and just in general, but we need to be able to relax our layered prevention measures when things are looking up. When we have fewer cases and fewer hospitalizations. So that's kind of like why they're sort of like loosening up the expectations. It doesn't mean it's over. It doesn't mean it's going to continue going down, because if there is a new variant that people aren't immune to, then that could cause a lot of issues.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely looking better. And
which is good.
Yeah. So Han Kim, a professor of public health at Westminster College in Salt Lake City, said he doesn't expect like the change of mask recommendations will have an impact in a lot of states, including Utah and stuff, which is where this thing was done, because like a lot of people have already just stopped wearing masks. So I don't think it's like this huge thing that like people will just like start like taking off masks, because most people are like don't wear masks anyways now. So yeah. Anyway.
All right. Thank you. All right, so ready for the last update? All right, so our last update. It's been
a long update day.
It has. Okay, so our last update is about the critical race theory. And this isn't like a specific event that took place. It's more just like, I feel like the critical race theory is like really relevant right now. And there's a lot of dispute around it and debates around it, especially it being taught in schools. So I kind of want to talk about like what it's about and why people don't want it to be taught in schools, that type of thing. So, basically, there are a lot of people against teaching the critical race theory. Like, for example, Kevin McCarthy, who's like a representative, said we should never teach this in schools. Ron DeSantis said it's like teaching kids to hate their country and other people. And in 2020, at least 9 states banned critical race theory in schools. So, like, why? Why is that? What is the critical race theory? I was trying to be cryptic, and I don't think it worked. You know, like, I wanted to, like, start out with, like, okay, that didn't work. Anyways, so I feel like a lot of times when we think of racism, you think of like one individual person like being racist to a group of people or another person. Like you think of a person, right, being racist to another person. But the critical race theory kind of like challenges this by saying it's not like because of individual bias, it's because of our society, because it's been weaved into like everything, like political institutions, economics. Like racism is a part of our everyday life because it has been weaved into every moment of our lives, and it's less about a person being racist and more about a society being racist, I guess. That's kind of like the fundamentals of it. It's less about like personal wrongs or racist people. It's more about like society being the framework of this. So basically how this started was people were like wondering, like in the 1970s there were a lot of like racist laws that were lifted, yet so many racist things still took place. You know, so many people were still racist. So they were like, why does this happen? Like, why are people so racist? Why do we even have racism to begin with? And they found that like there's like a continuous existence of racism in policies and in government. Like less in like people and more like in the broader scope, I guess. It's more of like a broader view. So it's like the idea that racism is like the fabric of the institution. Like one person, Ibram C. Kendi, like I was watching a video and he was like describing it, and I just feel like this sentence kind of like describes it well. He said, the problem isn't bad people, the problem is bad policy. So it's less about people and more about society, if that makes any sense. You know what I'm saying? So basically, but of course it's very controversial. Like there's a lot of controversy about it. One of the things people feel like is happening is like they're being racist to like white people, or like they're like making white people look bad, but that's not at all what they're saying. Like they're not even saying that like, oh, just white people are racist. It's more like societies, and also racism is normal. That's what the theory is also about. Not normal in like an okay, like it's fine way, but more like
it's normalized.
Yeah. So it happens all the time in everyday life. And another thing about this is that like race is like a social construct. It's more of like a social type of thing rather than, and that kind of stems from like the framework of society, stuff like that. Oh my god,
that's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I do think it's really interesting because it's less about like a person being, it's not like, oh, that person's just bad or that person's just racist and they're the reason we have racism. It's our world is racist, kind of that type of thing. So it's a different approach, I feel like, to how we've been taught, sort of. And there's a lot of controversy. Like, again, some people think it's like saying white people are bad, and then some people think it's just too heavy to teach in schools. Like, some people, there was like a quote from one person, I don't remember who it was, but they were like, oh, we should teach history in schools, but we shouldn't teach racism in schools. But it's like racism is a part of our history.
Yeah, you can't like ignore the parts that you don't like.
And I think that's a big part of like what we want to like get the word out there about it. Like you can't, just because it's heavy and just because it's bad, it still happened. It was a lot worse for the people living back then, you know?
The thing about, like, teaching these things is, like you said, like, people say, like, we don't want to teach the critical race theory and other things is because it will spark, like, rebellion in the country or whatever. But I argue that teaching race and, like, all these bad things doesn't make people hate their country. It makes them want to improve themselves and change that framework for the better, which is what we're trying to do here. Like, educate things that people don't want to talk about because they're important, and they allow us to recognize what we need to improve on so that we can be better when we are leading the country.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people think it will make us divided, but I feel like it does the absolute opposite.
Yes.
Like, I feel like it bands us together. Like, because then you start realizing, you start noticing things like around the world regarding like racism and stuff like that, and you start wanting to actually help. Like, I feel like knowing your history of your country is so important, and you can't sugarcoat the history just because it makes you feel bad. It's what happened. It's exactly, and I don't think it's like, oh, they're too young for this, it's too heavy for them. It was heavy for the people living during that time period who had to experience that. It was a lot worse for them. So
and then like people are like, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is like a temporary fix for a long-term problem, and ignoring the reality of something just so like you can feel happy without having to deal with the heaviness of it doesn't change it. It just makes it harder when like, conflict arises because of it.
Yeah, there's so much controversy around this and like teaching like racism in school and stuff like that, and it's like I don't even think this should be a debate. It's part of our history. If we teach history, we have to teach this because it is our history, you know?
And like we need to recognize our faults in order to do better.
Absolutely. So, you know what? I'm just going to end off on that note because I feel like that's a pretty good note to end off of. So, you know, I hope from this news update you got something, whether it be from the Russia-Ukrainian crisis, like learning something, the opportunity to help someone, just, you know, like whatever you learned from this, I hope it helped you in a way, you know. So.
And check out all our social medias, follow us, stay tuned. They'll all be in the bio, and just make sure that you watch all our episodes because we work really hard for this and we hope it's really useful to you.
So thank you so much, guys, and
stay tuned.
Of course, like usual, contact us. Okay, bye.
Bye.